The rhythm of the water is the first thing you notice as you stand upon the limestone docks of the great harbour. A steady, rhythmic pulse that has governed the life of this city since its very first stone was laid. It is a soft, wet sound, the Mediterranean tide brushing against the pale masonry with the persistence of a long-held secret. You can feel the vibration of the sea through the thin leather soles of your sandals, a gentle hum that travels up your legs and settles into your bones. The air here is heavy and thick, carrying the sharp, crystalline scent of salt spray mingled with the earthy, sweet aroma of papyrus drying in the sun. It is a fragrance unique to Alexandria, the smell of the sea meeting the smell of human thought. As you turn away from the water, the weight of your wool cloak shifts across your shoulders, its heavy weave providing a welcome barrier against the cooling evening air. The transition from the heat of the afternoon to the stillness of the twilight is always sudden here. You begin the walk toward the royal quarter, your footsteps echoing softly against the paving stones. The city is beginning to exhale. The frantic energy of the merchants and the sailors has begun to dissipate, replaced by a profound, echoing silence that seems to roll inward from the horizon. You pass between the towering white columns of the colonnades, where the shadows have grown long and violet, stretching out like fingers across the marble floors. The stone beneath your feet is cool now, having surrendered the warmth of the sun hours ago, and as you walk, you feel a familiar ache in the small of your back. The souvenir of a day spent leaning over wooden tables, unrolling and re-rolling the heavy cylinders of history. You find yourself approaching the massive complex of the Museion, the temple of the muses and the intellectual heart of the known world. It looms before you, not as a fortress, but as a sanctuary of light and logic. Even from the threshold, you can feel the shift in the atmosphere. The air within the library halls is different. It is stiller, filtered by the high, narrow windows, and scented with the dust of ages and the cedar oil used to preserve the scrolls. As you enter, a draught of this tempered air brushes against your face, carrying with it the faint metallic tang of ink. It is a space that demands a certain kind of presence, a slow and measured way of moving that you have perfected over many years. As you settle into this quiet space, perhaps adjusting your position as you prepare for sleep, you might find comfort in knowing you are not alone in this journey through the past. If you are settling in for the night, you are in the right place. Here at the Slumber Archives, we share new history narrations just like this one every single day, so if you find this journey into the ancient world relaxing, you might consider subscribing so you never miss a night of exploration. A simple like on this video also helps others who are seeking a quiet moment to find us too. But for now, let us return to the cool, shadowed halls of the Great Library. The silence here is not empty. It is dense, populated by the voices of thousands of men and women who recorded their dreams, their calculations, and their histories on the sheets of reed you now guard. You reach out and touch the edge of a mahogany shelf, the wood smooth and polished by the touch of countless hands. Your fingers trace the grain, feeling the slight indentations where the labels, the silly boy, hang from the ends of the scrolls. These small slips of parchment tell you whose mind you are about to encounter, whether it is the geometry of Euclid or the verses of Sappho. There is a profound loneliness in being the steward of so much thought. You are the bridge between the creator of the work and the silence of the future. The evening light begins to fail, casting the deep recesses of the scroll niches into total darkness, and you reach for a small oil lamp. The ceramic is warm to the touch, and as you strike the flint, the small flame flickers to life, casting a golden, dancing glow against the nearby walls. The smell of the burning olive oil is familiar and grounding, a domestic scent in a place of monumental ideas. You carry the lamp with you as you walk deeper into the stacks, the light pooling around your feet and reflecting off the polished floor. Each step you take is a deliberate choice. In this labyrinth of knowledge, you are never truly lost, for you know the geography of these shelves better than the streets of your own neighborhood. You stop before a particular section where the scrolls are older, their edges slightly frayed, and the papyrus turned a deep, honeyed brown. Here, the air smells more strongly of time, a dry, slightly sweet scent like old hay or pressed flowers. You pull a scroll from its resting place, feeling its surprising weight in your hands. It is a heavy thing, a physical manifestation of a human life. As you carry it to a reading desk, the wood smoke from a distant kitchen fire drifts through an open window, a reminder of the world outside that continues to turn, oblivious to the silent conversations happening within these walls. You sit down, the wooden chair creaking softly under your weight, and for a moment you simply sit in the darkness, listening to the distant, muffled sound of the waves still hitting the docks. The Mediterranean is always there, a constant reminder of the world's vastness and the library's precarious place on its edge. You imagine the ships out there in the dark, carrying more scrolls, more ideas, and more people toward this beacon of civilization. Your back aches, your eyes are tired, and the cool air of the Egyptian night begins to settle into the folds of your cloak, but there is a deep, quiet satisfaction in your labor. You are the keeper of the fire. You are the one who ensures that when the sun rises over the Pharos lighthouse tomorrow morning, the words of the past will still be here, waiting to be read, waiting to be remembered. The transition from sleep to wakefulness is not marked by the roar of the city, but by the absolute heavy silence of the stone. Your eyes open to the faint grey light of pre-dawn, filtering through a high, narrow slit in the masonry of your cell. This room is small, barely larger than the reach of your arms, and tucked away in a corner of the Great Library's sprawling complex. It is a space of necessity rather than luxury, where the walls are cool to the touch even in the height of summer, and the only scent is the faint, lingering aroma of dried papyrus and the cedar oil used to ward off the insects that crave the knowledge you protect. You push back the heavy wool of your sleeping pallet, feeling the sudden bite of the morning air against your skin. Your feet find the floor, and the grit of the stone feels familiar, a grounding sensation that connects you to the very foundations of this house of the Muses. There is a specific rhythm to your movements, a slow and deliberate choreography, born of years of repetition. You reach for your tunic, the fabric softened by countless washings in the brackish waters of the Nile, and wrap your cloak tightly around your shoulders to stave off the chill that has settled in your bones during the night. In the dimness, your hands move with a memory of their own toward the small bronze lamp resting on a stone ledge. You strike a flint, the small sparks dancing briefly in the air before catching the wick soaked in olive oil. A tiny amber flame blooms, casting long, wavering shadows that stretch across the ceiling like the fingers of the gods. As the light grows, it illuminates the stacks of scrolls piled at the foot of your bed, works you were examining until your eyes failed you the night before. You do not touch them yet. Instead, you hold the lamp aloft, watching how the light plays upon the rough-hewn walls. This flicker of fire is the first act of the day, a small defiance against the dark, and a signal to yourself that the vigil has begun once more. Leaving your cell, you step out into the long, vaulted corridor that leads toward the heart of the Mauseon. At this hour, the Great Library is a ghost of itself. The scholars, the poets, and the geographers are still lost in their dreams in their own quarters, and the bustling streets of Alexandria have not yet begun to hum with the cries of merchants and the clatter of chariot wheels. You are alone in the vastness. Your footsteps echo softly against the marble, a rhythmic pulse that seems to beat in time with the quiet heart of the building. You find yourself walking through the Peripatos,
the magnificent covered walkways lined with soaring columns that frame the central gardens. The air here is fresher, carrying the salt tang of the Mediterranean and the sweet, floral notes of the library's private courtyards. In the half-light, the statues of the great thinkers, Homer, Hesiod, and the philosophers of old, look like silent sentinels watching your progress. You pass them with a respectful nod, a silent acknowledgement of the weight they have placed upon your shoulders. Their words are housed just beyond these walls, and you are the one who ensures they remain undisturbed. The weight at your hip is a constant, comforting presence, the heavy ring of bronze keys that hang from your belt. They are cold and solid, clinking softly with every step you take. These are not merely pieces of metal, they are the physical manifestations of your authority and your burden. Each key fits a specific lock, a specific door that guards a specific branch of human thought. As you reach the towering doors of the main hall, you pause for a moment, letting the silence wash over you. The wood is ancient cedar, dark and fragrant, brought from the mountains of Lebanon and reinforced with iron bands that have begun to take on a dull patina over the decades. You select the largest key, its teeth worn smooth by years of use. Inserting it into the lock requires a firm, steady hand. You feel the mechanism resist for a heartbeat before it yields with a deep, metallic thrum that vibrates up your arm. With a concerted effort, you push the doors open. They move slowly on their massive hinges, groaning with a sound that seems to echo back through the centuries. The air that rushes out to meet you is different from the outside world. It is still, dry and heavy with the scent of 1,000 years of recorded thought. As you step inside, the scale of the room swallows the light of your small lamp. The shelves, or bibliothecae, stretch upward into the gloom, divided into countless pigeonholes where the scrolls rest in their protective leather cases. You walk down the central aisle, the flickering light of your lamp catching the titles written on the small parchment tags that hang from the ends of the rolls. Here is the medicine of Hippocrates, there the plays of Sophocles, and further back the secret histories of the Persian kings. You move through the rows, checking for any sign of dampness or the telltale dust left by boring beetles. It is a slow process, a visual inspection that requires you to be fully present in every moment. The shadows dance wildly as you move, making it seem as though the very walls are breathing. In this solitude, you feel the presence of the authors more keenly than you do during the busy hours of the afternoon. It is as if they are whispering to you from their resting places, reminding you of the fragility of their legacy. One spark, one leak in the roof, one moment of carelessness, and a voice that has survived for centuries could be silenced forever. This realization does not bring fear, but rather a profound sense of purpose. Your back may ache from the hard bed, and your hands may be stained with the ink of your own notations, but in this quiet hour before the world wakes, you are the most important person in the city. You reach the far end of the hall, where the great windows face the east. The sky is beginning to turn a pale, dusty rose, and the first true light of day begins to bleed through the shutters. You set your lamp down on a heavy oak table, its surface scarred by the pens of generations of scholars. There is a bowl of water and a clean cloth waiting there. You begin the ritual of cleaning the reading stations, wiping away the dust of yesterday's labor, so that the new day can begin on a clean slate. Your movements are rhythmic and soothing, a gentle swish of cloth against wood, the occasional clink of a ceramic inkwell being moved, the soft sigh of your own breath. The light grows stronger now, illuminating the motes of dust dancing in the air. They look like tiny stars, a miniature cosmos, contained within the library's walls. You watch them for a moment, lost in the beauty of the mundane. Soon the first of the junior scribes will arrive, followed by the senior librarians and the frantic energy of researchers seeking the truth about the stars or the lineage of queens. But for now, the scrolls are yours alone. You walk back toward the entrance, your hand trailing along the edge of the shelves, feeling the texture of the wood and the smoothness of the leather cases. You stop at a particular shelf and pull out a scroll, not for work, but for the sheer pleasure of the contact. It is a copy of the Odyssey, the script fine and elegant. You do not unroll it far, just enough to see the familiar opening lines. The ink is dark and bold against the cream-colored papyrus. You trace the letters with your fingertip, not reading them so much as feeling the shape of the ideas they represent. This is the ritual that sustains you. Before the demands of the administration, before the politics of the royal court, and before the endless task of cataloguing, there is this, the simple, profound connection between a human mind and the written word. As the sun finally clears the horizon, casting a long golden beam of light through the main hall, you hear the distant sound of the city waking up, a dog barking, the faint rumble of a cart, the calling of a bird from the harbour. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs with the scent of the library, and prepare yourself to welcome the day. The loneliness of the morning is not a burden, but a gift. A quiet space where you can remember why you chose this life of service to the dead and the unborn. You turn back toward the great doors, ready to greet the first scholar with a nod and a silent key, as the Great Library of Alexandria begins its day under your watchful eye. The air in the great hall is always several degrees cooler than the bustling streets of the city outside, a heavy, still coolness that seems to press against your skin like a damp cloth. You walk with a slow, rhythmic gait, the soft thud of your leather sandals against the polished marble floor echoing upward into the vast, vaulted ceiling. As you move deeper into the heart of the library, the light from the high, clerestory windows begins to fail, and you find yourself entering a world of shadows and soft amber glows. This is the architecture of knowledge, a space designed not for the comfort of the living, but for the preservation of the eternal. To your left and right, the walls are not merely stone, but a complex hive of order. You run your hand along the edge of an armaria, one of the thousands of recessed wall niches that line the corridors. The wood of the shelving is smooth, worn down by centuries of hands just like yours, and it smells faintly of cedar and beeswax. Within these niches, the scrolls are stacked like sleeping creatures, each one a fragment of a mind long since returned to the dust. You stop for a moment, adjusting a scroll that has rolled slightly out of alignment. The papyrus is dry and slightly raspy against your fingertips, a tactile reminder of the river reeds from which it was born. Some are wrapped in protective sleeves of fine linen, bleached white and soft as a shroud, while others are encased in toughened leather, dyed a deep earthy crimson to signify their importance or their origin in the distant lands of the East. The scale of it is often overwhelming, even for one who has spent a lifetime within these walls. As you look down the long axis of the hall, the rows of niches seem to stretch on forever, blurring into a singular, textured horizon that eventually vanishes into the absolute dark where the lamplight cannot reach. It is a terrifying and beautiful sight, the realization that no single human life, no matter how long or dedicated, could ever hope to consume even a fraction of what is stored here. You are a small, breathing point of light in a sea of silent ink. You reach for the heavy, wooden-bound volumes of the Pinax, the monumental cataloguing system begun by the great Callimachus. The weight of the ledger is substantial, a physical manifestation of the order you are sworn to uphold. As you turn the thick pages, your eyes trace the meticulously inked columns that categorize the sum of human thought into distinct streams: poetry, law, philosophy,
history, and the sciences. It was Callimachus who understood that a library without an index is merely a graveyard of lost ideas. Because of his vision, you can find a specific lyric from a forgotten island or a mathematical proof from a dead scholar simply by following the trail of his logic through the labyrinth of shelves. The Ptolemaics are more than just a list. They are a map of the human soul. You feel a quiet sense of pride as you cross-reference a new acquisition, your reed pen scratching softly against the page, the sound magnified in the profound silence of the hall. Each entry is a thread tied to a specific armarium, a specific shelf, a specific scroll. Without this system, the library would collapse under its own weight, becoming a mountain of meaningless gibberish. You think of the scrolls that are currently in your care, the way the ink sits upon the surface of the papyrus, sometimes raised and glossy, other times faded to a ghostly brown that requires you to squint in the dim light. The physical reality of your work is often found in the small, sensory details that others might overlook. You notice the way a scroll feels heavier when the air is humid, the fibers of the papyrus drinking in the moisture from the sea breeze. You know the specific, sharp scent of a scroll that has recently arrived from Pergamum, treated with different oils than those used here in Egypt. Sometimes you find a stray hair caught in the resin of a seal, or a smudge of charcoal from a scholar's guttering candle, tiny accidental ghosts of the people who have touched these objects before you. As you navigate the deeper recesses of the hall, the silence grows more profound, a heavy velvet cloak that muffles the sound of your own breathing. Here, the armaria are filled with the oldest works, the foundational texts that have survived wars, fires, and the slow, relentless erosion of time. You move with extra care here, your footsteps light, as if you are afraid of waking the thoughts that dwell within the dark. The darkness at the end of the hall is not empty. It is full of voices, thousands upon thousands of them, all waiting for a reader to bring them back to life. You pause at the edge of the light, the flickering flame of your oil lamp, casting long dancing shadows against the rows of scrolls. The architecture of this place was designed to inspire awe, with its soaring columns and vast echoing spaces, but to you it feels intimate. The niches are like small private cells, each one holding a world. You reach out and touch the cold stone of the wall, feeling the strength of the building that protects this fragile cargo. The stone is permanent, or as permanent as anything can be, while the papyrus is delicate, prone to rot and the hunger of insects. It is your hands that bridge the gap between the two, the softness of the organic and the hardness of the mineral. In the quiet of the morning, before the scholars arrive with their questions and their demands, you allow yourself to simply exist within this forest of knowledge. You imagine the thousands of miles these scrolls have travelled, stowed in the dark holds of grain ships, carried across burning deserts in cedar chests, or hidden under the cloaks of refugees fleeing crumbling cities. They have all found their way here, to these specific niches, to be counted and cared for by you. The sheer labour of it, the millions of lines of Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, and Latin, all organised into a single coherent whole. It is a feat of human will that rivals the building of the pyramids. As you turn to begin your first rounds of the day, checking for signs of dampness or the telltale dust of bookworms, you feel the familiar ache in your lower back. It is a dull, steady reminder of the hours spent leaning over tables and reaching for high shelves. Yet it is a grounding sensation, one that connects you to the physical reality of your task. You are not a ghost in this library. You are its steward, a living part of its intricate machinery. The architecture of knowledge is not just made of stone and wood and papyrus. It is made of the people who keep the flame of memory burning in the dark. The light from your lamp catches the gold leaf on a particularly ornate scroll case, a sudden spark in the gloom.
It reminds you that even in the most organized system, there is room for beauty and individual expression. You continue your walk, the scent of old paper and ancient dust trailing behind you like a familiar spirit. The hall stretches out before you, a path of light and shadow, and you follow it with the steady, unhurried pace of a man who knows exactly where he belongs. Each step is a reaffirmation of the order you serve, a quiet heartbeat in the center of the world's greatest mind. As the morning progresses, the first thin slivers of golden sunlight begin to pierce the high windows, illuminating the dust motes that dance in the air. These tiny shimmering particles are the only things that move in the stillness of the hall, rising and falling in the invisible currents of the room. You watch them for a moment, thinking about how they are composed of the very things you spend your life preserving. Microscopic fragments of skin, fabric, and papyrus, all swirling together in a silent golden ballet. Even in its decay, the library is beautiful. Even as it slowly turns to dust, it remains the center of your universe, a place where the past is never truly gone, but merely waiting in its niche for the turn of a page. The iron gall ink stains your fingertips a deep, permanent indigo, a mark of your trade that no amount of scrubbing in the cool waters of the Mediterranean can ever truly erase. It is the badge of the silent, the ink-shadowed skin of a man who spends more time in the company of the dead than the living. You move toward your small cedar desk, your sandals clicking softly against the limestone floor, a sound that seems to echo for an eternity, before dying away in the vastness of the hall. This is your ritual, the slow and rhythmic dance of preservation that occupies the better part of your waking hours. On the desk lies a scroll from the time of the first Ptolemy, its edges frayed and brittle, the papyrus having turned the color of parched earth over the centuries. It is your task to give these words a new body, to breathe fresh life into them by transcribing every stroke, every vowel, and every nuanced accent onto a fresh, supple roll of papyrus that smells of the river and the sun. As you sit, you feel the familiar, dull ache in your lower back, a constant companion that has grown more insistent with every passing year. Your spine has curved to match the arc of your desk, a physical manifestation of your devotion to the written word. You are a man shaped by your labor, your shoulders rounded from a lifetime of leaning into the light, your eyes narrowed from squinting at the minuscule script of poets and mathematicians. You reach for a small vial of cedar oil, uncorking it with a practiced twist of the wrist. The scent hits you immediately, sharp, resinous, and deeply grounding. It is a clean, medicinal smell, the very fragrance of immortality. You dip a soft cloth into the oil and begin to rub it gently onto the back of the new papyrus. This oil is the library's greatest defense, a shield against the tiny, voracious insects that would otherwise feast upon the knowledge of the world. The aroma fills your senses, masking the faint, musty scent of the decaying scrolls nearby, and for a moment, the world feels orderly and safe. The scriptorium is a place of profound, heavy silence, a quiet so thick it feels like a physical weight upon your skin. There are others here, seated at their own stations, but no one speaks. To speak would be to break the spell, to tether the mind back to the mundane world when it should be soaring through the thoughts of the ancients. The only sound is the rhythmic scratching of reed pens, the calamoué, moving across the textured surface of the pages. It is a dry, whispering sound, like the wind moving through autumn leaves or the scuttle of a beetle across a stone floor. You trim your own reed with a small, sharp knife, testing the point against your thumb. It must be perfect. A single blot of ink, a moment of distraction, and the work of a week could be ruined. You dip the pen into the inkwell, feeling the slight resistance of the liquid, and then,
With a steady hand that belies the exhaustion in your limbs, you begin the first line. Your eyes move back and forth, travelling the short distance between the old scroll and the new. It is a slow, meditative process, one that requires a total dissolution of the self. You are not a man with a name or a home or a hunger. You are merely a conduit, a bridge across which the thoughts of a long-dead philosopher may walk into the future. You notice the way the original scribe formed his letters, the slight flourish at the end of a sigma, the hurried slant of his omicrons. You find yourself wondering about him. Did his hand cramp as yours does? Did he sit in this very room, watching the same dust motes dance in the light? You feel a strange kinship with him, a brotherhood of the pen that spans generations. You are both servants of the same master, guardians of a flame that requires constant tending lest it flicker and go out. The physical toll of this work is a quiet, creeping thing. By midday, your neck feels as though it has been turned to stone, and a sharp pain begins to throb behind your right eye. You have learned to live with the blurring of your vision, the way the letters sometimes seem to swim and merge like schools of tiny fish in a dark pool. You pause for a moment, closing your eyes and pressing your ink-stained palms against them, letting the darkness soothe the strain. You can feel the weight of the library all around you. Thousands upon thousands of scrolls, millions of words, all pressing in with the gravity of a mountain. It is a heavy burden to carry. The knowledge that if you fail in your accuracy, a piece of human understanding might be lost forever. A misspelled word could change the meaning of a medical formula. A skipped line could render a mathematical proof incomprehensible. Accuracy is not merely a professional requirement. It is a moral imperative, a sacred trust. And so, you return to the task. The scratching of the reed continues, a steady, hypnotic pulse in the stillness. You lose track of time. The shadows on the floor lengthen, creeping across the stones like slow-moving ink, but you do not look up. You are focused on the texture of the papyrus, the way it drinks the ink, the slight resistance of the fibers. There is a certain peace in this repetition, a rhythmic comfort that numbs the loneliness of your existence. In the world outside the library walls, there is noise and chaos, the shouting of merchants in the great harbour, the clatter of chariots on the canopic way, the endless, shifting politics of the palace. But here, within the circle of your lamp's glow, there is only the word. There is only the slow, deliberate movement of your hand, tracing the shapes of ideas that were old before you were born and will remain long after you have returned to the earth. As the afternoon wanes, the smell of the cedar oil seems to deepen, growing richer as it soaks into the fibers of the new scroll. It is a comforting scent, one that speaks of endurance and preservation. You think of the scrolls you have finished, now tucked away in their cedar boxes or resting in their niches, each one a testament to your patience and your pain. Your fingers are cramped into a permanent claw, and you have to consciously pry them open to set the pen down. You stretch your arms, hearing the faint, dry pop of your joints, a sound like a snapping twig. You are tired, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that sleep can never quite reach, yet there is a quiet satisfaction in the work. You have transcribed 10 columns today, 10 columns of thought that have been saved from the slow erosion of time. You look at the fresh papyrus, the ink still glistening slightly in the dimming light. The letters are crisp and clear, standing out against the pale background with a sharp, defiant energy. They look strong. They look as though they could last another 100 years, perhaps even 1,000. You carefully roll the old, damaged scroll, feeling its brittleness under your touch, and place it aside with the reverence one might show a relic. It has done its duty. It has passed its soul into the new vessel you have prepared. You feel a strange sense of relief, a loosening of the tension in your chest. For today,
the battle against decay has been won. The silence of the scriptorium remains unbroken, but it is no longer a heavy silence. It is a full one, ringing with the echoes of the words you have just written, a quiet chorus of voices from the past, singing softly in the cedar-scented air.
The copper tang of the sea air begins to drift through the high, narrow windows of the scriptorium, mingling with the dry, peppery scent of the papyrus. You stretch your fingers, feeling the stiffness in your knuckles, a reminder of the hours spent hunched over the desk, and you listen to the distant, rhythmic sound of the harbour. Beyond these quiet walls, the great harbour of Alexandria is a chaotic symphony of creaking timber, snapping sails, and the shouting of men in a dozen different tongues. It is the lungs of the city, breathing in the wealth of the world. But for you, it is something more. It is the source of the Great Library's lifeblood. Every ship that drops anchor in that turquoise water is not merely carrying grain or silk or spices. It is carrying potential. It is carrying words that have never been read in this city, thoughts that have travelled across the wine-dark sea to find a home on your shelves. You remember the decree, the law of the ships issued by the Ptolemaic kings with a hunger for knowledge that bordered on the divine. It is a simple, ruthless command. Every vessel that enters the port must be searched, not for contraband, not for gold or illicit wine, but for books. As you walk toward the heavy bronze doors of the library to take your evening air, you think of the officials down at the docks, the men whose job it is to board every galley and merchantman. You can almost see them now, their sandals clattering on the wooden decks as they move through the holds, their eyes searching for the telltale glint of a cedar scroll case or the rough texture of a leather-wrapped bundle. They are looking for the treasures of the mind, and when they find them, they do not ask for permission. They take. The scrolls are brought here, to this very hall, to be examined by men like you. You recall the weight of a recent arrival, a bundle of papyrus still damp with the salt spray of the Mediterranean, its edges curled and brittle from the journey. As you unrolled it, you saw the script of a distant land, perhaps a collection of hymns from the islands, or a treatise on medicine from the far west. It is a strange, heavy feeling to hold someone's property in your hands, knowing it will never return to them. Under the king's law, the originals are kept here, in the safety of the Great Library, while the owners are given a copy, hastily scribbled by the scribes in the lower rooms. It is a grand intellectual theft, a hoarding of the world's wisdom that feels both magnificent and deeply unsettling. You are the guardian of these stolen sparks, the keeper of a fire that grows larger with every ship that arrives. Sometimes the weight of this moral compromise sits heavy in your stomach, like a stone. You think specifically of the Athenian tragedies, the works of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. Years ago, the king sent word to Athens, requesting to borrow the official state copies of these plays, the definitive versions that define the very soul of Greek culture. To ensure their safe return, the king deposited a staggering sum of silver, 15 talents, as a guarantee. It was a fortune, enough to build a fleet or feed a city. But when the scrolls arrived in Alexandria, the king simply kept them. He forfeited the silver without a second thought. He chose the ink and the parchment over the precious metal, deciding that the words of the poets were worth more than any treasury of coin. You have held those Athenian scrolls. You have felt the texture of the ancient papyrus, and you have seen the precise, elegant hand of the master scribes who first recorded those immortal lines. They sit now in the inner sanctum, protected from the damp and the light, while the Athenians hold only the copies we sent back in their stead. There is a quiet, persistent guilt that flickers in your mind when you pass that shelf. You are a man of letters, a man who believes in the sanctity of truth and the preservation of history. And yet, you are a participant in this grand deception. You are the one who catalogues the loot. You are the one who ensures that these treasures, taken by force or by trickery, are never lost again. It is a lonely burden, this knowledge that the foundation of your life's work is built upon the broken promises of kings. As you stand on the terrace, looking out toward the Pharaoh's lighthouse as its great fire begins to glow against the deepening violet of the sky, you think of the sheer diversity of the world that flows through your fingers. The library is a mirror of the known world, reflecting every culture that has ever put pen to parchment. You have seen scrolls arrive in the sharp, angular scripts of the Phoenicians, and others in the flowing, decorative characters of the Persians. You have seen the strange, blocky letters of the Hebrews being translated into the familiar Greek of your own tongue, a monumental task that has taken years of patient labor. You have seen maps drawn by sailors who have glimpsed the edges of the earth, and astronomical charts from the east that track the movements of stars you have never even noticed. The world is vast, and it is messy, and it is beautiful, and here in the silence of the library you are trying to weave it all together. You are trying to find the common thread that links the poet in Athens to the mathematician in Syracuse and the priest in Memphis. Every scroll that comes off a ship is a piece of a puzzle that may never be finished. You feel the cool evening breeze pull at the hem of your wool cloak, and you shiver slightly. The ache in your back is a dull, familiar companion now, a mark of your service to these silent voices. You are tired, but it is a deep, satisfying tiredness. You think of the sailors down in the harbour, perhaps drinking in the taverns along the waterfront, unaware that the scroll they carried in their sea chest is now being meticulously copied and filed away in the greatest repository of knowledge the world has ever known. They see the gold and the grain. They do not see the immortality that passes through their hands. But you see it. You feel it in the way the air changes when a new box of manuscripts is opened. A scent of cedar, old dust, and the faint, lingering smell of a world you will never visit. You are a prisoner of these walls, in a way, bound to the scrolls and the shelves, but through them you have travelled further than any merchant or soldier. The law of the ships has made this city the intellectual capital of the Mediterranean, a place where the mind is prized above all else. And while the ethics of it may be murky, the result is a miracle of preservation. In a world where cities burn and empires crumble, where memory is as fragile as a moth's wing, you are building a fortress for the human spirit. You turn back toward the interior of the library, the steady flame of the oil lamps casting long, flickering shadows across the floor. The silence greets you again, but it is no longer the silence of emptiness. It is the silence of 1,000 voices, all waiting for you to listen. You walk slowly, your sandals whispering against the stone, passing row after row of pigeonholes filled with the wisdom of the ages. Each one is a ship that has come to rest. Each one is a life that has found its way to you. And as you return to your desk to extinguish the last of the lamps, you realize that the loneliness of your life is the price you pay for this connection. You are the bridge between the past and the future, the thin line of ink that holds the world together. The ships will continue to arrive, the kings will continue to hoard, and you will continue to wait, pen in hand, for the next arrival of the unknown. The harbour is never still, and the library is never full. There is always one more scroll, one more voice, one more story, waiting to be saved from the dark. Your hand rests for a moment on the smooth wood of the desk, feeling the warmth left behind by the lamp. The day is done, the work is secure, and for now, the great archive sleeps alongside you. The scent of roasting lentils and coriander drifts through the high, vaulted corridors, a humble reminder that even the most elevated minds are tethered to the needs of the body. You follow the aroma. your sandals clicking softly against the polished marble floors, moving toward the great dining hall of the Museion. This is the heart of the community, the place where the scholars, poets, and scientists gather to sustain themselves between their long hours of study. As you enter, the scale of the room swallows the sound of your footsteps. The ceiling is lost in shadows, supported by pillars so thick they feel like the trunks of ancient stone trees. There is no clatter of boisterous conversation here, no shouting across tables or the raucous laughter of the marketplace. Instead, there is a profound shared silence. You take your place at one of the long wooden tables, the surface worn smooth by decades of resting elbows and sliding bowls. Around you, men who have mapped the stars and untangled the mysteries of geometry sit in quiet contemplation. You watch an elderly mathematician break a piece of barley bread, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the wall, perhaps still tracing the lines of a proof in his mind's eye. This is the communal life of the library, a gathering of the world's greatest intellects, yet it feels more like a monastery than a palace. You eat your meal slowly, the simple flavors of salted fish and olives grounding you, while the collective focus of dozens of silent thinkers creates a weight in the air, a pressure of pure thought that makes the very atmosphere feel thick and humming. When the meal is finished, you seek the open air, your body craving the movement that the cramped scriptorium denies. You step out into the gardens, and the transition is like a cool hand pressed to a fevered brow. The heat of the Egyptian sun is tempered here by the proximity of the sea and the clever design of the walkways, which funnel the Mediterranean breeze through groves of pomegranate and fig trees. The sound of water is constant, a gentle rhythmic splashing from the tiered fountains that anchor the courtyards. You walk along the colonnades, the shade of the roof flickering over you as you pass each pillar. Here the silence of the dining hall gives way to the low, melodic murmur of debate. You pass two philosophers pacing beneath a trellis of climbing vines, their voices hushed, their hands moving in small, precise gestures as they navigate the complexities of ethics or the nature of the soul. They do not look at you as you pass. In this place, you are a ghost among ghosts, a silent observer of the intellectual tide that rises and falls within these walls. You stop by a pool where lotus flowers float in perfect stillness, their white petals reflected in the dark, cool water. The humidity of the garden clings to your skin, smelling of damp earth and crushed mint, a stark contrast to the dry, dusty air of the papyrus stacks. As you linger in the dappled light, a strange sensation begins to settle over you, a feeling that you are never truly alone, even in your moments of deepest solitude. You are the guardian of the voices, the one who ensures that the dead continue to speak. When you walk these paths, you feel the weight of the invisible crowd pressing in around you. You are surrounded by the spirits of those whose words you have spent the day cataloguing and mending. Homer is here, in the rhythmic pulse of the fountain. Hesiod is in the scent of the turned earth. Sophocles is in the long tragic shadows cast by the afternoon sun. They are your constant companions, more real to you than the living scholars who share your bread. You know the cadence of their thoughts, the specific way they turn a phrase, the recurring obsessions that haunted their lives centuries ago. To be the librarian is to live in a perpetual state of haunting. You are a servant to the immortal, a steward of the echoes that refuse to fade. It is a heavy crown to wear, this intimacy with the departed. You carry their secrets in the ink stains on your fingers, and their anxieties in the tension of your shoulders. You are the bridge between the world that was and the world that is, a lonely sentry standing at the edge of the great forgetting. This realization brings with it a peculiar kind of isolation. You look at the scholars debating under the trees, and you feel a distance that no amount of shared study can bridge. They are here to use the knowledge, to build upon it, to argue and refine and create something new. But you are here to protect it. Your relationship with the scrolls is not one of utility, but of devotion. While they look forward to the next discovery, you are constantly looking backward, ensuring that not a single syllable is lost to the damp or the insects or the simple erosion of time. You are the anchor that keeps this vast ship of intellect from drifting away into the mist. As you walk back toward the main building, the stone steps feel cold beneath your feet, even through the leather of your sandals. The transition from the vibrant, living garden back into the hushed, tomb-like stillness of the library is always a somber one. The air grows still again, the light dims, and the smell of old parchment rises to meet you like a familiar, dusty embrace. You realize that your life is measured out in columns of text and the slow consumption of oil lamps. You are a vessel for the past, and in that filling, there is little room left for yourself. You return to your small, private corner, a space tucked away behind a forest of cedar shelving. The wood is dark and aromatic, the scent of it acting as a natural ward against the pests that would feast on the knowledge of the ages. You sit down, the familiar ache in your lower back returning as you settle into your chair. The world outside the library walls, the bustling harbour of Alexandria, the shouting merchants, the political intrigues of the Ptolemaic court, feels like a dream, a flickering shadow play that has nothing to do with the reality of your existence. Here, in the heart of the sanctuary, time does not move in a straight line. It circles and loops, bringing you face to face with poets who died 300 years ago, as if they were standing in the room with you. You pick up a scrap of papyrus, a fragment of a lyric poem that has survived a journey across the sea. The ink is faded, the edges frayed, yet the emotion trapped within the words is as sharp and raw as the day it was written. You feel a sudden piercing surge of empathy for the long-dead author, a woman who lived on an island you will never visit, who felt a grief you can only imagine. This is the burden and the beauty of your work. You are the keeper of human feeling, the one who ensures that a cry of pain or a song of joy can still be heard across the vast, silent gulf of centuries. The shadows in the room begin to lengthen, stretching across the floor like dark fingers reaching for the scrolls. You do not light your lamp yet, preferring to sit in the gathering gloom, letting your eyes rest. The library is breathing around you, a slow, rhythmic expansion and contraction of air through the high vents, carrying the faint sound of the sea. You think of the thousands of scrolls resting in their pigeonholes, each one a life, a mind, a world captured in ink. You are the only one awake in this city of the dead, the only one who hears the collective whisper of a million words waiting to be read. It is a profound loneliness, but it is also a profound privilege. You are the solitary flame burning in the center of the dark, the one who keeps the ghosts warm. As the last of the daylight fades, leaving only a pale silvery glow from the high windows, you find yourself leaning back, your head resting against the cool wood of the shelf. The silence is absolute now, a heavy velvet blanket that covers everything. You close your eyes, and for a moment, the distinction between your own thoughts and the voices of the scrolls begins to blur. You are part of the library, and the library is part of you. A single vast organism of memory, holding its breath in the Egyptian night, waiting for the dawn to bring another day of preservation. A sharp, dry crack echoes through the chamber, a sound no louder than a snapping twig, yet it makes your heart skip a beat in the stillness. You freeze, your fingers hovering just millimeters above the papyrus. In the dim light of your workstation, you realize that the silence of the library is never truly empty. It is filled with the tiny, treacherous sounds of decay. You look down at the scroll in your hands, a treatise on geometry that has travelled across the sea from Rhodes, and you feel the terrifying fragility of it. To the rest of the world, this is a monument of human genius, but to you, It is simply organic matter, dried reeds and sap, that is slowly, inevitably trying to return to the earth. The air here is heavy, thick with the salt of the Mediterranean and the damp breath of the Nile Delta. You can feel it on your skin, a fine invisible mist that clings to your robes and softens the calluses on your palms. While the city outside thrives on this moisture, here it is your greatest enemy. You watch as the humidity seeps into the fibers of the scrolls, making the ink bleed ever so slightly at the edges of the letters, turning crisp thoughts into blurred shadows. On other days, when the hot winds blow in from the desert, the air turns parched and cruel, sucking every last drop of suppleness from the papyrus until it becomes as brittle as a fallen leaf in autumn. You move with agonizing slowness, unrolling the cylinder an inch at a time, your breath held tight in your chest. You know that if you move too quickly, if you lose your patience for even a second, the ancient fibers will snap and a sentence that has survived for 100 years will be lost forever, reduced to a handful of brown flakes on the floor. You lean forward, the scent of cedar oil and old dust filling your nostrils, and you notice a tiny circular hole near the margin of the text. Your stomach sinks. It is the signature of the Sylvanus, the bookworm. To you, these are not merely insects. They are the silent vandals of history, the tiny, mindless architects of oblivion. You imagine them burrowing through the thoughts of Aristotle, eating their way through the genealogies of kings and the maps of the stars, turning the wisdom of the ages into a fine, powdery dust. You spend hours meticulously inspecting the shelves, your eyes straining in the gloom to catch the slight movement of a beetle or the telltale glint of a silverfish darting behind a cedar box. Every scroll you handle must be dusted with obsessive care, treated with oils that repel the invaders without staining the precious surface. It is a war of attrition, fought with small brushes and pungent resins, a battle you know you can never truly win, only delay. The physical toll of this vigilance settles into your shoulders, a dull ache that never quite leaves you. Your back is curved from years of leaning over the tables, and your eyes often burn from the strain of tracking the minute lines of Greek and Demotic script in the flickering light. You reach for the small oil lamp at the corner of your desk, but your hand pauses mid-air. You stare at the tiny dancing flame, a golden speck in the vast darkness of the hall. It is your only source of light, your only way to see the beauty you are sworn to protect, and yet it is also the greatest threat of all. You think of the thousands of scrolls surrounding you, miles of dry, flammable papyrus stacked in wooden pigeonholes, a literal forest of tinder waiting for a single stray spark. You find yourself imagining the nightmare, a sleeve catching the rim of the lamp, a sudden gust of wind through a high window, the first lick of orange flame touching the edge of a shelf. In your mind, you see the fire leaping from one scroll to the next, fueled by the very knowledge it consumes. You see the thoughts of poets and mathematicians turning into plumes of black smoke, rising up toward the stars until there is nothing left but ash and silence. This fear is a constant companion, a cold weight in your gut that makes you check the position of your lamp a dozen times an hour. You have learned to move with a strange, liquid grace, keeping your elbows tucked and your movements deliberate, as if you are walking through a dream where one wrong step could unmake the world. As you sit there, the weight of the responsibility feels almost physical, a heavy wool cloak draped over your tired frame. You are the guardian of a flickering candle in a world of shadows. You realize that you are not just preserving paper. You are holding back the tide of forgetting. Every time you repair a frayed edge with a bit of fresh paste, every time you carefully re-roll a scroll to keep the tension even, you are fighting against the entropy that seeks to swallow everything. The humidity, the insects, the brittle decay, and the ever-present threat of fire. They are the agents of time, and you are the lone sentry standing in their way. You settle back into your chair, the wood creaking softly beneath you. The parchment under your hand feels cool now, almost like skin. You trace the curve of a letter with your fingertip, marveling at how something so powerful can be so incredibly fragile. The city of Alexandria sleeps outside, its people dreaming of commerce and wine and the warmth of their beds, entirely unaware of the silent struggle taking place within these walls. You are the only one awake to hear the soft rustle of the scrolls as the building settles, a sound like 1,000 sighs. You pick up your brush, dipping it into a small jar of cedar oil, and begin the slow, rhythmic work of treating the edges of the papyrus. The scent is sharp and clean, cutting through the musty smell of the stacks. It is a meditative process, one that requires your entire focus, pulling you away from your anxieties and into the immediate, tactile reality of the scroll. You watch the oil soak into the fibers, darkening them slightly, giving them back a hint of the life they once had when they were green reeds swaying in the river shallows. In this moment, the loneliness of your life feels less like a burden and more like a sacred vow. You are the one who stays behind so that the past can move forward. You are the one who endures the strain and the fear so that a student, perhaps 100 years from now, can sit in this same spot and read these same words. The thought brings a quiet peace to your heart. You adjust the wick of your lamp, turning it down just enough to see by and continue your work. The night is long, and the enemies of the scroll are patient. But for now, in the circle of your golden light, the memory of the world is safe. The shadows in the corners of the room seem to pulse with a life of their own, stretching and shrinking as the flame of your lamp dances. You look up at the high, vaulted ceiling, lost in the blackness above, and feel the immense scale of the library pressing down on you. It is not just a building, it is a living thing, a vast, sleeping giant made of ink and thought. And you are its heartbeat, the small, steady pulse that keeps the blood flowing through its veins. You take a deep, slow breath, tasting the dust and the cedar, and feel a sense of profound connection to the men who stood here before you, and those who will stand here after you are gone. We are all just temporary caretakers, you think, passing the torch from one hand to the next, hoping the flame doesn't go out on our watch. As the hours crawl toward dawn, the chill of the night begins to seep through the stone floor, numbing your toes. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, the rough wool scratching against your neck. The physical discomfort is a reminder that you are still here, still present, still fighting the good fight. You look at the scroll one last time, ensuring it is perfectly aligned before sliding it back into its protective case. The click of the wooden cap is a final satisfying note in the symphony of the night. You lean back, closing your eyes for just a moment, letting the silence wash over you like a cool tide. The world is old, and it is weary, but here, amidst the scrolls and the shadows, it is preserved in a state of eternal youth, waiting for the next pair of eyes to bring it back to life. The copper taste of ozone hangs in the humid air, drifting in from the Mediterranean on a wind that feels heavier than it did only a season ago. You stand upon the high marble balcony of the museum, your hands resting on a balustrade that has been smoothed by the touch of 1,000 scholars before you. Below, the city of Alexandria is a grid of white stone and bustling markets, but your eyes are drawn past the great lighthouse of Pharos to the mouth of the harbour. The water, usually a brilliant, shifting turquoise, is broken today by the dark, rhythmic silhouettes of foreign timber. These are not the grain ships of the Nile or the spice traders from the east. These are the triremes of Rome, their oars rising and falling with a terrifying mechanical precision that seems to strike a rhythm against the very heart of the city. The arrival of Julius Caesar has not come with the sudden crash of a siege, but rather with a slow, stifling weight that settles over the Great Library like a layer of fine, grey dust. You feel the change in the way the air moves through the colonnades. There is a new tension in the shoulders of the junior scribes as they scurry past you, their eyes downcast, their whispers no longer about the lost plays of Sophocles, but about the rumours drifting up from the royal quarter. The political landscape of Egypt, once a complex but familiar dance of Ptolemaic tradition, has been tilted on its axis. You can feel the shift in your very bones, a dull ache that mirrors the dampness of the sea fog. The sovereignty of thought, which you have guarded for so many decades behind these thick stone walls, suddenly feels fragile, like a piece of papyrus left too long in the sun. As you gaze out at the harbour, you watch the Roman standards catch the light, glints of gold and iron that represent a world of law, roads, and conquest. For centuries this library was a sovereign island, a place where the only kings were the poets and the only wars were fought with logic and rhetoric. But as the foreign warships fill the docks, the realization settles into your chest, heavy as a leaden weight. The library is no longer a sanctuary set apart from the world. It has become a piece on a board, a prize to be managed by men who value the steel of a gladius more than the metre of a lyric poem. You turn away from the sea, the wool of your cloak brushing against the stone with a soft, shushing sound that seems far too quiet for the thoughts racing through your mind. Walking back into the cool, dim interior of the stacks, the smell of old cedar and dried ink greets you like an old friend. But today, even this familiar scent feels tinged with melancholy. You run your fingers along the edges of the pigeonholes, feeling the rough texture of the wood and the smooth, cool surfaces of the ceramic jars. Each one contains a world, a voice from a time when Egypt was the centre of all things. Now you wonder if these voices will soon be drowned out by the rhythmic chanting of the legions. The Greek traditions that built these walls, the obsession with categorization, the endless debates in the gardens, the reverence for the written word are being overshadowed by a shadow cast from the west. You remember the stories of the Roman sack of Corinth, the way they appreciate art not for its soul, but as loot to be paraded through the streets of their own sprawling capital. A cold shiver traces the line of your spine. You imagine a Roman centurion walking these halls, his hobnailed boots clattering on the mosaic floors, his eyes seeing not the wisdom of the ages, but merely a collection of flammable tinder and expensive curiosities. You find yourself stopping before a shelf of Roman histories, ironically enough. You pull a scroll from its place, the weight of it familiar in your palm, and you carry it to a small reading desk near a window. The light is fading, turning the white marble to a soft, bruised purple. As you unroll the parchment, the Latin script looks different to your eyes today, sharper, more utilitarian than the flowing, elegant Greek you spend your life translating. It is a language of command, of architecture, of empire. You realize that the world is becoming smaller, more connected, but perhaps at the cost of its mystery. The tension in the city is a physical thing, a hum that vibrates through the soles of your feet. You can hear the distant sound of shouting from the direction of the palace, the clatter of horses on the paving stones, and the rhythmic thud of crates being unloaded at the docks. The silence of the library, once so profound and absolute, now feels like a thin veil that could be torn at any moment. You find it harder to focus on the work at hand. Your mind wanders to the flammable nature of this place, the thousands of miles of dry papyrus, the oil lamps that flicker in the drafts, the wooden shelving that lines every room. You think of the Great Library not as a fortress, but as a living organism, one that requires peace and stability to breathe, without the patronage of a stable crown, without the isolation from the whims of generals. How long can this treasure endure? You look at your ink-stained fingers, the calluses earned from a lifetime of service to the word, and you feel a sudden sharp pang of insignificance. You are but one librarian, a single guardian in a long line of keepers, standing at the edge of a tide that no one can turn back. As the sun finally dips below the horizon, the Pharos begins to glow, its great fire fueled by resinous wood and reflected by mirrors of polished bronze. It casts a long flickering light across the harbour, illuminating the Roman ships like ghosts on the water. You stand there for a long time, watching the light dance on the waves, feeling the cool evening air pull the warmth from your skin. The city is changing. The world is changing. And here, in the heart of the greatest collection of knowledge ever assembled, you realize that the most dangerous thing in the world is not ignorance, but the moment when power decides that knowledge is merely a commodity. You slowly roll the scroll back up, the sound of the parchment rubbing against itself a dry, ghostly whisper in the growing dark. You slide it back into its place with a practiced, gentle hand, ensuring it is perfectly centered. It is a small act of order in an increasingly chaotic world. You walk through the darkened halls, the shadows of the pillars stretching out to meet you, and you realize that your task has changed. You are no longer just a cataloguer or a scholar. You are a witness. You are the one who will remember what this place was before the shadow of Rome stretched across its threshold. The weight of the keys at your belt feels heavier tonight, the iron cold against your hip. You make your rounds, checking the locks, ensuring the lamps are extinguished, moving through the silence with a slow, measured gait. Each footfall echoes, a solitary heartbeat in the vast, still chest of the library. You find comfort in the routine, in the physical reality of the stone and the scrolls, even as the world outside prepares for a storm. As you finally reach your small sleeping quarters, you do not light a candle. Instead, you sit by the small window that looks out over the rooftops. The stars are coming out, the same stars that the ancient astronomers of this very building mapped out centuries ago. They do not care for Caesar or for the shifting borders of empires. They simply burn. And in their cold, distant light, you find a small measure of peace. The library may no longer be a sovereign island, and the future may be written in a language you do not fully love, but for tonight, the scrolls are safe. For tonight, the silence holds. You lay your head down, the smell of old paper still clinging to your hair, and listen to the distant, rhythmic lap of the sea against the stones of a city that is no longer entirely its own. And as sleep begins to pull you under, you wonder if the books dream of the people who read them, or if they simply wait, patient and enduring, for a morning that may never look the same again. The copper-tasting air of 48 BCE does not arrive with a scream, but with a low, rhythmic thudding that vibrates through the soles of your feet as you stand upon the cool balcony of the Museon. It is the sound of Caesar's ships, trapped in the harbour, and the desperate, frantic energy of a war that has finally breached the city's limestone walls. For days, the tension has been a physical weight, a tightness in your chest that no amount of rhythmic cataloguing could ease. You have watched the Roman legions entrench themselves in the palace quarter, their iron-shod sandals clattering on the same stones where poets once walked to discuss the stars. The world is shrinking, narrowing down to the space between the docks and the library shelves, and as the sun dips low, painting the Mediterranean in bruised purples and deep, blood-rich reds, you realize that the silence you have spent a lifetime protecting is about to be shattered. The first sign of the disaster is not the heat, but the light. It begins as a flickering orange pulse, distant and dancing, reflecting off the white marble of the Pharos lighthouse. At first, you think it is merely the torches of the sentries, but the glow grows, spreading like a spilled jar of saffron across the dark waters of the great harbour. Caesar has ordered his own fleet fired to prevent it from falling into the hands of the Egyptian forces, a tactical decision made in the heat of a siege. But fire is a wild animal that knows nothing of politics or strategy. From your high vantage point, you watch the flames leap from the wooden decks to the warehouses lining the quay. The wind, usually a cool friend that brings the scent of salt and distant islands, has turned into a traitor, carrying the sparks upward toward the heart of the city. The orange glow begins to crawl up the marble facade of the library, turning the pristine white stone into a flickering, ghostly amber. It is a beautiful sight, in a terrible, heart-stopping way. You stand there for a moment, paralyzed by the sheer scale of the light, before the smell reaches you. It is not the clean scent of a hearth or the aromatic wood of a funeral pyre. It is the heavy, choking stench of cedar oil, pitch, and old, dry wood. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a frantic bird, trapped in a cage of bone. You turn away from the balcony, your sandals slapping against the floor as you run back into the great hall, where the air is still cool and smells of dust and patience. But you know that peace is an illusion now. You call out to the other scribes, your voice sounding thin and strange in the vast, echoing space. There is no time for the usual hushed reverence. You move with a desperate, trembling speed, your hands reaching for the most precious scrolls first, the ancient, brittle papyri of the poets, the irreplaceable maps of the stars, the heavy, leather-bound histories that contain the only record of peoples who have long since vanished from the earth. The weight of the scrolls feels different tonight. They are no longer just objects of study. They are fragile lives that you must carry to safety. You gather them in your arms, the rough texture of the cases scratching against your skin, and begin the grueling process of moving them deeper into the inner sanctums, away from the outer walls that face the burning docks. Your breath comes in ragged gasps as you descend into the lower levels. The stone stairs cool beneath your feet, a sharp contrast to the rising heat you can feel pressing against the building's exterior. The shadows here are long and distorted, dancing in the reflected light that pours through the high windows. Every time you return to the upper shelves, the air is thicker, more golden. You see the smoke beginning to curl around the tops of the columns like ghostly vines. It is a thin, grey veil at first, but it carries the sting of ash. You work until your muscles ache, until your fingers are stained dark with the dust of centuries, and your throat is raw from the haze. You are a small, solitary figure moving through a cathedral of knowledge, trying to hold back the tide with nothing but your own two hands. As the night deepens, the roar of the fire becomes a constant, low-frequency growl that you feel in your teeth. You can hear the distant shouting of soldiers and the crash of collapsing timber at the waterfront. But inside the library, there is a strange, suspended quality to the time. You find yourself lingering for a second over a scroll of Aristarchus, wondering if the world will ever again understand the math contained within its fibers if it should turn to ash tonight. You tuck it deep into a stone niche in the cellar, whispering a silent plea to gods you aren't even sure you believe in. The smoke is no longer a thin veil. It is a heavy shroud that settles in the back of your throat, tasting of burnt cedar and lost words. Eventually, the sheer exhaustion overtakes the adrenaline. You lean against a cold stone pillar in the deepest part of the archives, your breath hitching in the dark. The orange light still flickers far above, visible through the stairwell, but down here the air is still. You realize that you cannot save everything. The Great Library is too vast, its contents too numerous for a dozen men, let alone one, to relocate in a single night of chaos. This realization brings a profound, hollow sadness, a grief not for yourself, but for the future. You think of the students who will come tomorrow, or 100 years from tomorrow, and find gaps in the shelves where there used to be light. You close your eyes, and for a moment the sound of the fire merges with the sound of the sea, two hungry elements vying for the city's soul. When the morning finally breaks, it does not bring the usual clarity of an Egyptian dawn. The sun is a pale, sickly disk hanging in a sky choked with grey soot. The immediate danger to the library building has passed, the stone walls held, and the fire at the docks was eventually contained, but the victory feels hollow. You emerge from the depths, your eyes stinging, and your clothes smelling of a forest fire. As you walk through the great hall, you see the fine layer of grey ash that has settled over everything. It covers the reading tables, the statues of the muses, and the remaining scrolls like a fall of dark snow. You reach out and run a finger through the soot on a marble plinth. It is soft, almost greasy to the touch. This is the physical remains of the warehouses at the quay, and perhaps, as the rumours will later suggest, the remains of thousands of scrolls that were waiting to be shipped or catalogued near the water. The vulnerability of the place has been laid bare. For centuries the library was a fortress of the mind, seemingly untouchable by the petty squabbles of kings. But now the smoke lingers. It hangs in the high rafters, stubborn and bitter, refusing to be aired out by the morning breeze. For weeks afterward, the smell of the fire remains your constant companion. It clings to your hair, your skin, and the very fibres of the papyrus you handle. Every time you open a scroll, you half expect to find it charred, even though you know the flames never touched this room. The smoke has become a part of the library's history now, a silent, invisible layer added to the archives. You spend your days cleaning, gently brushing the ash from the shelves with a soft feather duster, but the task feels endless. The soot finds its way into the smallest cracks, a reminder that the world outside is volatile, and that the stone walls of the Museion are not as thick as you once believed. You find yourself sitting in the courtyard more often now, watching the charred debris float in the fountain. The city is rebuilding, Caesar is consolidating his power, and the war moves on to other shores, but for you, something has shifted permanently. The loneliness of your life as a guardian has taken on a sharper edge. You are no longer just a keeper of knowledge. You are a sentry at a gate that has already been breached. You look at the scrolls you saved, huddled in their dark stone niches, and you feel a fierce, protective ache. They are survivors, just as you are, but they are also hostages to fortune. As the sun sets on these post-fire evenings, the sky often turns that same terrifying orange, a reminder of the night the docks burned. You sit in the fading light, the cool stone of the bench grounding you, and you breathe in the lingering scent of smoke. It is a heavy, contemplative smell. It speaks of the fragility of all things made by human hands. And yet, as you return to your small room and prepare for sleep, you find a strange, quiet resolve. The fire did not take everything. The silence has returned, though it is a heavier, more haunted silence than before. You lay your head down, the rhythmic lap of the sea once again the only sound, and you realize that as long as one person remains to blow the ash from the pages, the light of the library has not yet gone out. The smoke may linger in the halls, but the words are still waiting for the morning. The smell of cedarwood oil and fresh papyrus begins to replace the lingering scent of soot, a change so subtle at first that you barely trust your own senses. For a long time, the air in the great library had felt thin, as if the very breath of the building had been stolen by the flames of Caesar's war. You had spent years walking through the gaps in the shelves, your fingers tracing the empty spaces where masterworks once sat, feeling the absence of knowledge like a physical ache in your chest. But then, the rumours began to drift across the harbour, carried by the sailors and the merchants who frequented the royal quarter. They spoke of a gift, a gesture of such immense scale that it seemed more like a dream than a reality. It is said that Marc Antony, in his deep devotion to Cleopatra, has decided to heal the wounds of the city with the only medicine that matters to a scholar. He has promised her the entire collection of the Library of Pergamum. You remember the first morning the ships arrived, their hulls sitting low in the water, burdened by a weight far more precious than grain or gold. 200,000 scrolls. The number itself is difficult to hold in your mind. It is a sea of ink, a mountain of thought that has been uprooted from the hills of Mysia to be planted here, in the fertile soil of Alexandria. As you stand on the quay, the wind tugging at the hem of your heavy wool cloak, you watch the endless line of porters begin the ascent toward the Museion. Each man carries a cedar chest or a bundle wrapped in protective linen, and you realize that your life, which had become a quiet vigil over a dying flame, is about to be consumed by a labor of staggering proportions. The integration of a rival library is not merely a matter of finding space on a shelf. It is a collision of two different worlds, two different ways of seeing the universe. The scholars of Pergamum had their own systems, their own ways of cataloguing history and science, and now it falls to you to translate their order into your own. You feel the slow, steady thrum of excitement returning to your limbs, a warmth that counters the chill of the stone floors. Your back may ache from years of leaning over desks, and your eyes may strain in the flickering lamplight, but the weariness feels lighter now. There is work to be done. As the days turn into weeks, the great hall becomes a labyrinth of crates and unrolled parchment. You spend your mornings kneeling on the floor, your knees cushioned by a small reed mat, as you carefully break the seals of the Pergamene scrolls. There is a specific sound to it, the dry, rhythmic crackle of ancient papyrus being unfurled for the first time in a new land. The texture of the paper is different here. It feels slightly thicker, perhaps a bit more rugged than the delicate sheets produced in the Delta. You run your palm over a treatise on medicine, feeling the slight ridges of the ink, and you realize that you are holding the thoughts of men who lived hundreds of miles away, men who are now your silent companions in this vast, echoing space. It feels like a second golden age, a sudden miraculous spring following a bitter winter. The silence of the library is no longer the silence of a tomb, but the hushed, busy quiet of a workshop. You hear the scratching of nibs against papyrus from the scriptorium, the soft murmur of assistants discussing where to house the new collection of Athenian plays, and the heavy thud of the wooden doors as more crates are brought in from the heat of the sun. You find yourself working later into the evening, the small flame of your oil lamp casting long dancing shadows against the walls. The darkness outside the windows is absolute, but inside the world is growing brighter with every scroll you catalogue. The logistical challenge is immense. You must decide if these new copies of Homer are superior to the ones that survived the fire, or if they should be kept as secondary references. You find yourself comparing the handwriting of scribes from across the sea, noting the way they curl their letters or the specific abbreviations they use for common words. It is a delicate, meditative process. You take a scroll, you read its title, you check its condition, and then you find its place in the great Pinakes, the monumental catalogue that serves as the map for all human knowledge. Your hand moves across the register, adding a name here, a title there, weaving the legacy of Pergamum into the tapestry of Alexandria. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, you stop and simply look at the piles of knowledge surrounding you. The sheer volume of it is humbling. You think of the kings and queens who bartered for these words, the wars fought over them, and the thousands of miles they have travelled to reach your hands. You are the gatekeeper of this influx, the one who must ensure that not a single line is lost in the transition. Your fingers are perpetually stained with ink, a dark shadow beneath your nails that no amount of washing can truly remove, but you wear it like a badge of office. It is the mark of your service to the past and the future. The air in the library feels different now, thicker somehow, as if the presence of so many new voices has added a layer of density to the atmosphere. You walk through the stacks, and the scent of the cedar chests is overwhelming, a sharp, clean fragrance that speaks of distant forests and preservation. You find yourself touching the shelves as you pass, your hand brushing against the smooth wood, feeling the vibration of a city that is once again the center of the intellectual world. The fear that haunted you after the fire, The fear that the world was slipping into a long, dark sleep has begun to recede. As you sit at your desk, the moonlight streaming through the high clerestory windows, you pick up a scroll that has just been unpacked. It is a work of philosophy, perhaps one that was thought lost in the chaos of the previous years. You unroll it slowly, your breath catching as you recognize the elegant, precise hand of a master scribe. The words flow across the page like water, clear and unwavering. You realize then that the library is not just a building or a collection of objects. It is a living thing, capable of healing itself, of growing stronger in the wake of tragedy. You feel a deep, settling peace as you begin to write the entry for this new arrival. The scratching of your pen is the only sound in the room, a rhythmic, comforting pulse. You are tired, yes, the kind of tiredness that settles deep in the bones, but it is a good exhaustion. It is the fatigue of a builder, of a gardener tending to a vast and complicated landscape. You know that tomorrow will bring more crates, more scrolls, and more questions, but for now, in the stillness of the night, you are content. The light of Alexandria is burning brightly once again, fueled by the gift of a Roman general and the tireless hands of a librarian who refused to let the silence win. The weight of the wool cloak around your shoulders feels comforting now, a warm embrace against the cooling night air. You lean back in your chair, your eyes tracing the lines of the vaulted ceiling, and you think of the generations of scholars who will come here, who will sit where you sit and read the very scrolls you are cataloguing tonight. You are a bridge between what was and what will be, a silent guardian of the world's memory. As you finally extinguish your lamp and prepare to leave the hall, the darkness does not feel heavy. It feels full of the whispers of 200,000 new voices waiting for the morning sun to wake them. The silence of the Great Library has changed its character over the passing decades, shifting from the vibrant, expectant hush of a room filled with thinkers to something thinner, more brittle, like the papyrus that now sits undisturbed for years at a time. You find yourself walking the long corridors of the Museion, and the sound of your sandals against the marble floor seems louder than it used to be, echoing off the high, cold walls because there are fewer bodies to absorb the noise. The air carries a different scent now, less of the fresh cedar oil used to treat new scrolls, and more of the dry, stagnant smell of old stone and the slow, inevitable accumulation of dust. Your hands, once nimble and quick to catch a falling stylus, have grown gnarled and slow, the skin like parchment itself, mapped with the blue veins of a long life lived in the service of words. You pull your heavy wool cloak tighter around your shoulders, feeling the chill of an Egyptian winter that seems to seep deeper into your bones than it did in your youth. The Roman governors who arrive from across the sea speak of a world that is changing, a world where the priorities of the empire have shifted away from the quiet cultivation of the mind toward the loud, clashing demands of the frontier and the heavy burden of administration. You remember a time when the royal treasury flowed like a river, when the Ptolemaic would spare no expense to hunt down a rare tragedy or a forgotten map, but those days have receded into the haze of memory. Now the funding arrives in trickles, barely enough to pay the few remaining scribes or to repair the leaky roof over the western wing. You spend your mornings looking at the ledgers, the ink fading on the pages, noting the vacancies in the ranks of the scholars that will never be filled. The great lecture halls, where once the air was thick with the heat of debate and the scratching of 100 pens, are now mostly empty. You walk past them and see only the ghosts of arguments, the shadows of men who have long since departed for Rome or Athens, or who have simply vanished into the quiet obscurity of the provinces. As the years pass, you notice that the dust settles most thickly on the higher shelves, those lofty reaches that require a ladder and a steady hand to access. You stand at the base of one such shelf, looking up into the gloom where the light of the high windows doesn't quite reach, and you realize it has been a decade since anyone requested the works of the obscure astronomers who once mapped the outer reaches of the stars. The knowledge is still there, resting in its clay jar or its wooden chest. But it is becoming a silent knowledge, a secret known only to the spiders who weave their intricate webs across the labels. You feel a pang of sorrow for these forgotten voices, these men and women who poured their lives into a single scroll only for it to be buried under a layer of grey silt. You reach up, your fingers trembling slightly, and trace a line through the dust on a shelf edge, leaving a dark streak in the silver coating. It is a small gesture, a way of saying that you are still here and that they are still remembered, even if the world outside has forgotten how to ask the right questions. The meals in the communal dining hall have become sombre affairs, the long oak tables sparsely populated by the few elderly residents who remain. You sit in your accustomed place, the wood polished smooth by centuries of elbows and forearms, and you listen to the clatter of a single spoon against a ceramic bowl. There is no more talk of the library's expansion, no more excited whispers about a new shipment of scrolls from the markets of Rhodes. Instead, the conversation turns to the price of grain, the rumours of unrest in the streets, and the steady decline of the city's influence. You find yourself retreating into your own thoughts, your mind drifting back to the days when the library was the beating heart of the world, a place where the light of reason burned so brightly that it seemed it could never be extinguished. Now, you feel like a caretaker of a fading dream, a ghost moving through a house of memories that are slowly being bleached white by the relentless sun. You spend more of your time in the small, cramped office that has been your sanctuary for a lifetime, surrounded by the familiar clutter of your trade. The wood smoke from the small brazier curls around your head, stinging your eyes and clinging to your hair. But it provides a necessary warmth against the dampness that rises from the harbour. You have become the library's living memory, the one person who knows where the rare medical texts are hidden and which scrolls are too fragile to be unrolled. You are the one who hears the creak of the building at night, the way the stone groans under the weight of its own history, and you find comfort in these sounds. They are the language of a place that is tired, a place that has seen too much and held too much, and is now simply asking for the grace to rest. Sometimes, when the afternoon sun hits the courtyard at just the right angle, you go out to sit by the fountain, though the water no longer dances as high as it once did. You watch the pigeons fluttering among the columns, their wings beating a soft rhythm against the stillness. You think of the young librarian you once were, full of fire and a desperate need to organize the chaos of human thought. You smile to yourself, a slow and weary expression, realizing that the chaos was never something to be conquered, only something to be lived alongside. The Great Library was never just a collection of books. It was a testament to the human desire to be seen, to be heard, and to leave something behind before the darkness closes in. And as you sit there, the warmth of the stone seeping through your robes, you accept your role as the final witness, the one who stays behind to turn out the lamps and make sure the doors are bolted against the night. The city outside the walls feels increasingly foreign to you, a place of noise and commerce that has no use for the quiet contemplations of the past. You hear the distant shouts of the sailors and the rumbling of carts on the cobblestones, and it feels like a different world entirely. Here, within the sanctuary of the scrolls, time moves differently. It stretches and thins, looping back on itself until the past feels more real than the present. You find yourself talking to the authors whose works you tend, whispering a greeting to Homer or a question to Herodotus as you pass their sections. They are your truest companions now, the ones who do not age and do not leave, even as the funding dries up and the scholars drift away. You are the lonely ghost of Alexandria, a sentinel at the edge of an era, holding a flickering candle against a rising wind that smells of salt and change. As the light begins to fail, You make your final rounds, your footsteps slow and deliberate. You check the seals on the jars, you adjust a scroll that has slipped slightly out of place, and you pause to look out over the great harbour. The Pharaoh's lighthouse is beginning to signal to the ships at sea, its great fire a beacon in the gathering gloom. You think of the light of knowledge and how it, too, requires constant fuel and a dedicated hand to keep it burning. You know that your time is short, that soon there will be no one left who remembers the library as it was in its glory. But for tonight, the scrolls are safe, the doors are locked, the dust is still, and you are here, the silent guardian of the world's fading memory, ready to follow the shadows back to your bed and dream of a time when every shelf was full and every voice was heard. The weight of the keys in your palm is different now. They are heavier, forged of thick, unyielding bronze, and they do not open the airy, sun-drenched halls of the great library's youth, but rather the reinforced gates of the Serapeum, the daughter library. You feel the shift in the very air as you walk toward the Rakotis district, the oldest part of the city, where the ground rises toward the heavens. Your sandals click against the uphill stones, a rhythmic, steady sound that echoes against the high walls of the temple complex. The breeze here carries less of the salt from the harbour, and more of the heavy, sweet scent of incense and the dry, metallic tang of baked earth. The great library down by the water has become a ghost of itself, a place of memories and hollowed-out shelves. But here, within the shadow of the great column of Diocletian, the heart of your work has found a new, more guarded rhythm. As you reach the outer gates of the Serapeum, you pause to adjust the heavy wool of your cloak against the evening chill. This place was built to be a fortress of the mind as much as a house of the gods. You feel the strength of the walls, thick and imposing, designed to withstand more than just the passage of time. The world outside is changing, growing louder and more fractured, but as the iron-bound doors groan open under your hand, you step into a sanctuary of profound, weighted silence. The transition is physical. The noise of the city markets and the distant shouting of the streets fades, replaced by the cool, subterranean stillness of the vaults. You descend the wide stone stairs, your hand trailing along the smooth, cold granite of the banister, feeling the ancient craft of the stonemasons through your fingertips. Down here, in the heart of the hill, the scrolls are tucked away in niches that feel like secret pockets of the earth itself. The beauty of the Serapeum's underground library is a quiet, subterranean elegance. The walls are lined with white marble that seems to glow with a faint inner light, even in the dimness of your flickering oil lamp. The air is still and cool, smelling of old parchment and the damp, earthy stone of the foundation. It is a place where the heat of the Egyptian sun cannot reach, and where the frantic energy of the surface world feels like a distant dream. You walk through the long, vaulted corridors, your lamp casting long, dancing shadows that play across the thousands of pigeonholes, each one holding a cylinder of knowledge that has been moved here for safekeeping. You find yourself lingering in the sections that the world outside would call dangerous. As a librarian in these twilight years, your role has shifted from a mere organizer of thoughts to a silent protector of forbidden wisdom. You run your fingers over the cedar tags of scrolls that speak of ancient stars, of the movement of the planets, and of philosophies that do not fit the narrow mold of the rising faith. There is a tension in the city now, a growing friction between the old ways and the new Christian movement that gathers in the squares. You hear the whispers of it even in your dreams, the calls for the destruction of pagan idols and the cleansing of heretical texts. But to you, a scroll is not a weapon or a sin. It is a conversation across time. You pull a scroll from its shelf, the papyrus dry and slightly brittle, and you feel the immense responsibility of your solitude. If these walls were to fall, if these vaults were to be opened by those who do not value the nuance of the past, this ink would vanish as if it were never written. You are the guardian of the other side of the story.
You protect the calculations of Eratosthenes and the verses of poets who loved the world too much to see it in black and white. In the soft light, you see the intricate carvings on the ceiling, patterns of vine leaves and geometric shapes that seem to pulse with the heartbeat of the earth. It is a beautiful, lonely fortress. Your back aches with a familiar, dull throb as you stoop to check the lower bins, ensuring that no dampness has seeped through the stone. The Serapeum is well constructed, but the earth is a living thing, and it requires constant vigilance to keep the rot at bay. You find a small patch of moisture near the base of a column and spend an hour carefully moving several dozen scrolls to a higher, drier shelf.
The physical labor is slow and methodical. You cradle each scroll against your chest as you move it, feeling the weight of centuries in your arms. These are not just objects, they are the voices of men and women long dead, who entrusted their thoughts to the future, hoping someone like you would be there to catch them. As the night deepens, you sit on a small wooden stool in the center of the vault, the light of your lamp reflecting off the polished marble floors. You think of the scholars who used to fill the great library, the shouting debates, the laughter, the frantic scratching of pens. Here, in the Serapeum, the atmosphere is more somber, more reverent. It is the library of the aftermath. You are well aware that the world is tilting on its axis, and that the age of the great polymaths is giving way to an age of singular truths. It makes the quiet beauty of these underground rooms feel even more precious, like a secret shared between you and the stones. You think of the forbidden scrolls you tucked away earlier, the ones that detail the anatomy of the human body or the strange mathematical patterns found in the music of the spheres. To the zealots in the streets, these are works of darkness, but to you, they are the highest form of light. You feel a strange, quiet defiance in your work. Every night that you lock these doors, every day that you keep the dust from settling too thickly on these shelves, you are winning a small silent war against oblivion. The stone floor is cold beneath your feet, a reminder of the permanence of the earth compared to the fleeting nature of human thought. And yet, as you look around at the thousands of scrolls, you feel a sense of enduring strength. The Serapeum was built to last, to be a rock in the middle of a rising tide. You take a deep breath, the cool air filling your lungs, and you feel the tension in your shoulders begin to dissipate. The silence here is not empty, it is full of potential, a reservoir of human experience waiting for a time when the world is ready to listen again. You stand up slowly, your joints stiff from the long hours of standing and bending. You make one final circuit of the vaults, your lamp swinging gently at your side. The light brushes against the titles of works by Aristarchus, by Callimachus, by names that are becoming rarer and rarer on the lips of the people outside. You reach out and touch the wall, the stone smooth and reassuringly solid. You are a part of this architecture now, a living pillar in the temple of memory. As you prepare to leave the underground vaults and return to your small room near the temple courtyard, you take one last look at the long, marble-lined corridor. The beauty of it catches in your throat, the way the shadows settle into the niches, the way the silence seems to hum with the collective weight of a million words. You turn the key in the inner lock, the sound a sharp, clear note in the stillness. Tomorrow, there will be more rumors of unrest, more whispers of the world changing beyond recognition. But tonight, the Serapeum holds its breath. The wisdom of the ages is tucked safely into the side of the hill, and you are the one who knows its secrets. You walk back toward the stairs, your heart a little lighter, your mind filled with the quiet, enduring grace of the scrolls you have sworn to protect. The stairs are steep, but you climb them with a steady, purposeful gait, leaving the beautiful, silent vaults to their long, peaceful sleep in the dark. The smell of wood smoke has changed over the years, turning from the scent of hearth and home into something more acrid, more final. It clings to the heavy wool of your cloak as you stand in the center of the great hall, a space that once vibrated with the hushed whispers of 1,000 scholars, but now echoes only with the sound of your own slow, rhythmic breathing. There is a weight in the air today, a stillness that feels less like peace and more like an ending. You look up at the high, vaulted ceilings where the sunlight used to dance off gilded inscriptions, but the gold has long since been scraped away by desperate hands, leaving only the pale, scarred stone behind. The great bronze doors, which once required 3 men to push open, now hang crookedly on their hinges, groaning in the salt breeze that sweeps in from the Mediterranean, carrying the scent of a world that no longer values what is kept within these walls. As you begin your final walk through the corridors, your sandals click softly against the mosaic floors, and you notice how many of the tiny coloured stones are missing, leaving gaps like missing teeth in an old man's smile. You reach out a hand to brush against the rows of niches, the pigeonholes that for centuries held the collective memory of humanity. They are empty now. Most of them are nothing but hollow shadows, stripped of their cedar shelving and their precious burdens. Where once the white of papyrus and the rich brown of leather cases greeted your eyes, there is now only dust and the occasional spiderweb shimmering in the dim light like a ghost of the knowledge that has fled. You remember the feeling of a full scroll in your hand, the heft of it, the slight crinkle of the reed paper, the faint, sweet smell of the cedar oil used to keep the insects at bay. Now your fingers find only the cold, rough texture of the limestone. You walk deeper into the stacks, toward the sections that were once the pride of the library, the works of the great tragedians, the maps of the stars, the medical texts that promised to heal the world. They are gone. Some were taken by scholars fleeing to the north or the east, tucked into travelling bags like stolen embers from a dying fire. Others were lost to the slow, grinding machinery of neglect, left to rot in damp corners, when the roof began to leak and there was no one left with the silver to repair it. But most were taken by the fires of war and the shifting tides of empires that saw no use for the words of the dead. There is a legend beginning to circulate in the streets outside, a story whispered by the merchants in the agora, that the scrolls of the Great Library are being carted away by the wagon load to heat the city's public baths. They say that for 6 months the furnaces of Alexandria have been fueled by the thoughts of poets and the calculations of mathematicians. You try to push the image from your mind, the sight of Sophocles turning to ash to warm a soldier's feet, the geometry of Euclid curling into smoke just to provide a moment's steam. But the thought persists, a dull ache in your chest that no amount of deep breathing can soothe. You find a single scrap of papyrus caught in a crack in the floor, a jagged fragment no larger than the palm of your hand. You kneel slowly, feeling the familiar protest of your knees, and pick it up with trembling fingers. The ink is faded, but you can still make out a few characters. Perhaps a line from a lost comedy, or a fragment of a recipe for a long-forgotten ink. It is a tiny, fragile thing, and as you hold it, you realize it is likely one of the last original thoughts left in this building. You tuck it into the folds of your tunic, a small, private weight against your heart. The silence here is no longer the productive silence of study. It is a hollowed-out silence, the kind that exists in a tomb after the mourners have gone home. You pass the empty lecterns where you once sat for hours, correcting the work of copyists and debating the placement of a single comma. The wood is scarred and stained, and the inkwells are dry, their bottoms crusted with a dark, brittle residue. The world outside is moving on, indifferent to the treasures it has discarded. The harbour is still busy with ships, the markets are still loud with the haggling of traders, and the sun still sets in a magnificent display of violet and gold over the Pharos lighthouse. But here, in the heart of the library, the light is fading for the last time. You realize that you are no longer a guardian of knowledge, but a witness to its departure. You are the last one who remembers where the great history of the Ptolemy once sat, and where the secret maps of the southern lands were hidden. When you walk out of these doors today, that map will exist only in the shifting architecture of your own memory. You stop for a moment at the base of a great pillar, leaning your forehead against the cool stone. You think of the generations of librarians who came before you, the men who spent their entire lives in these halls, who knew every scroll by its scent and every scholar by his gait. You wonder if they knew this day would come, or if they truly believed that the Great Library was as eternal as the stars it catalogued. As you turn to leave, you look back one last time at the long shadowed perspective of the hall. The dust motes dance in the final shafts of afternoon light, swirling in the air like the spirits of a million unread words. There is a profound loneliness in being the last one to care, the last one to feel the weight of what has been lost. But as you pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and step toward the exit, you carry that small fragment of papyrus with you. It is not much, a single spark from a dying sun, but it is enough to remember that for a few hundred years, humanity tried to gather the world into a single room. You walk out into the cooling air of the city, the sound of the surf in the distance, leaving the hollowed-out halls to the shadows and the slow, inevitable work of time. The great silence has finally arrived, and you are the only one left to hear it. The salt spray from the Mediterranean catches on your eyelashes, a sharp, cold sting that reminds you of the world beyond the marble walls. You pull your heavy wool cloak tighter around your shoulders, the fabric rough against your neck, smelling faintly of the oil lamps and the dry, sweet dust of the stacks that have been your only company for so long. As you walk further from the ruins of the Museion, your sandals click rhythmically against the paving stones, a hollow sound in the deepening twilight. The city of Alexandria is changing. The grand avenues are narrower now, choked with the debris of a dozen small conflicts, and the golden age feels like a half-remembered dream you had in your youth. Yet as you touch the small scrap of papyrus tucked into your belt, you realize that nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed. The weight of the world's knowledge does not simply vanish when the ink fades or the vellum curls in the heat of a fire. You think of the travelers you have seen in the marketplace, men with sun-darkened skin and eyes that have seen the far reaches of the East. They carry with them more than just spices and silk. They carry the ideas you once guarded. In the decades and centuries that follow your own quiet life, the essence of this place will migrate like the birds that cross the sea. You can almost feel the phantom weight of the scrolls being packed into leather satchels, destined for the rising house of wisdom in Baghdad or the quiet, candlelit scriptoriums of Constantinople. The Greek words you spent your life cataloguing will be translated into Arabic, then back into Latin, passed from hand to hand like a torch in a long, dark corridor. The scholars who follow you will never know your name, but they will sit in the same hunched posture, their backs aching with the same dull heat as they labor to preserve a single line of poetry or a mathematical proof that you once saved from the damp. The dream of the universal library is a recurring fever in the mind of humanity, a ghost that refuses to be laid to rest. Even as you watch the shadows stretch over the harbour, you understand that the library was never just a building of stone and mortar. It was an intention, a collective vow that we might one day understand everything. This desire is a physical thing, a pulse you feel in your own wrists. When the fires finally claimed the last of the physical shelves, the library simply moved into the thoughts of the inquisitive. It became a map behind the eyes of every astronomer who looked at the stars and wondered at their distance, and every physician who pressed a hand to a fevered brow. You are part of a long, unbroken chain of keepers, a lineage of those who refuse to let the light go out, even when the oil is low and the room is freezing. As you find a place to rest near the water's edge, the stone beneath you is still warm from the day's sun.
a small comfort against the damp air. You look out toward where the great library once stood, and you see not a ruin but a foundation. In the modern world, long after your bones have turned to the same dust as the scrolls, people will return to this shore with shovels and brushes. They will sift through the silt of the harbour, looking for the echoes of the halls you walked. They will find broken columns and submerged statues, the silent witnesses to the grandeur that was. But the true archaeology is not found in the mud. It is found in the way a student, centuries from now, will stumble upon a fragment of a lost play and feel their heart leap with a sudden, inexplicable recognition. The spirit of inquiry is a stubborn thing. It survives through the darkest winters, huddling in the corners of monasteries and the back rooms of shops, waiting for the moment it can bloom again. Your breath slows as the rhythm of the waves lulls you into a state of quiet reflection. The loneliness of your life, the years spent in the company of ghosts and ink, no longer feels like a burden. It feels like a privilege. You were the bridge between what was and what will be. The silence of the library is not the silence of the grave, but the silence of a seed beneath the earth, gathered and waiting. You close your eyes, and the sound of the surf becomes the sound of 1,000 pages turning at once, a soft rustling wind that carries the voices of poets and philosophers across the vast expanse of time. The scrolls may be gone, but the questions they asked remain, vibrating in the air like the hum of a distant bell. You realize with a sudden and profound clarity that the library is being rebuilt every time someone shares a story or asks why the stars move as they do. It is a living thing, vast and invisible, stretching across continents and eras. The ache in your back eases as you surrender to the night, knowing that the work continues without you. The city of Alexandria may crumble, its lighthouses may fall into the sea, and the names of its kings may be forgotten, but the curiosity you nurtured in the dark is immortal. It is the fire that cannot be quenched by any conqueror, the ink that cannot be washed away by any flood. You are a part of the great memory of the world, a single vital thread in a tapestry that is still being woven. The air grows cooler, and the scent of wood smoke drifts from a nearby hearth, mingling with the brine of the sea. You pull your cloak over your head, creating a small, private world of warmth. In the darkness behind your eyelids, you can still see the rows of pigeonholes, the neat labels, the smooth texture of the papyrus beneath your fingertips. It is a peaceful image, a sanctuary that exists beyond the reach of time. You have done your part. You have guarded the flame through the windiest part of the night, and now, as the first hint of a different dawn begins to touch the horizon of history, you can finally let go. The great silence is no longer a void. It is a space filled with the potential of everything yet to be rediscovered. As you drift towards sleep, the physical world begins to blur. The cold stone, the smell of the sea, the weight of your own body, all of it softens into a gentle, rhythmic pulse. You are no longer just the keeper of the scrolls. You are the breath that carries the words. You are the dream of the library itself, eternal and wandering, finding a home in every mind that dares to wonder. The shadows of Alexandria are long and deep, but they are not cold. They are thick with the presence of 1,000,000 thoughts, 1,000,000 voices whispering in the dark, reminding you that you were never truly alone. The work is finished, and yet it is only just beginning. Outside, beyond the thick stone walls that have held the heat of the day, the silver light of the moon begins to spill across the Mediterranean, turning the wine-dark sea into a sheet of hammered pewter. You stand by the high window of the Great Library, feeling the cool, salt air brush against your cheek, a sharp contrast to the stale, dry scent of papyrus and cedar oil that has filled your lungs for so many hours. High above the harbour, the Pharos lighthouse stands as a silent sentinel,
its great fire casting a long, pulsing beam across the whitecaps. From this distance, the flames look like a captured star, tethered to the earth by human hands, guiding the weary sailors home to a city that never truly sleeps. But here, in the heart of the Museion, the silence is profound. The harbour below is quiet now. The creak of rigging and the shouts of the dock workers have faded into the rhythmic thrum of the tide against the limestone quays. You watch the lighthouse for a long moment, feeling the steady pulse of its light in time with your own heartbeat, a reminder that even in the vastness of the night there is a direction to be found. The wind begins to pick up, a low and mournful whistle that snakes through the empty stone arches of the colonnade. It is a lonely sound, the music of a city settling into its bones, yet it does not feel hollow to you. As the breeze rushes through the halls, it carries the faint, ghostly rustle of 1,000 scrolls, a soft scratching sound like the feet of tiny birds across a courtyard. You pull your heavy wool cloak tighter around your shoulders, the fabric rough against your skin, smelling faintly of the oil lamps you extinguished one by one. The chill of the evening is settling into the floorboards, and you feel the ache in your lower back from leaning over the high desks, a physical weight that tells the story of your devotion. Every step you take across the marble floor echoes softly, a solitary beat in the grand, empty theatre of human knowledge. You are the last one moving through these halls, the final guardian of thoughts that span centuries and continents, and the weight of that responsibility feels less like a burden now and more like a gentle embrace. You walk slowly toward the deepest recesses of the stacks, where the shadows are thickest and the air is stillest. Your fingers trail along the edges of the wooden pigeonholes, touching the smooth, rounded ends of the scrolls as you pass. They are all in their places, the poets, the mathematicians, the dreamers, who charted the movement of the planets and the anatomy of the human soul. You realize, with a sudden and quiet clarity, that the library is no longer just a building of stone and ink. It has become a part of you, a map etched into your mind, a landscape of ideas that you carry wherever you go. Even if the stone were to crumble, even if the papyrus were to turn to dust in the humid air, the essence of what you have guarded remains. You close your eyes for a moment, and you can almost see the words floating in the dark, glowing with a soft internal light. You see the diagrams of Eratosthenes, the verses of Sappho, the clinical observations of Galen, all of them tucked away safely in the quiet corners of your memory, where no fire can reach them and no time can wear them away. There is one scroll in particular that you imagine now, a single humble cylinder of reed and ink that represents everything you have lived for. It isn't a famous epic or a royal decree, but perhaps a collection of simple observations about the way the light hits the Nile at dawn, or a series of letters between friends long since gone. You tuck this image away in the center of your thoughts, wrapping it in the soft fabric of your own consciousness. It is your own private archive, a sanctuary that exists within the space of a single breath. As you stand there in the darkness, the boundaries between the library and your own self seem to dissolve. You are the vessel, you are the bridge between the ancient past and a future you will never see. The knowledge is safe because you have cherished it, because you have allowed it to change the way you see the world. The great work is not just in the preservation of the physical object, but in the quiet, steady fire of understanding that you keep burning in the hearth of your own mind. The night deepens, and the city of Alexandria falls into a heavy velvet slumber. The Pharos continues its rhythmic flash, a lighthouse for the mind as much as for the sea. You find a small stone bench near the exit, where the moonlight pools on the floor like spilled milk. You sit for a moment, letting the exhaustion wash over you, a warm and heavy wave that starts at your feet and rises to your chest. Your hands, stained with the ink of 1,000 corrections, rest quietly in your lap. The world outside is vast and indifferent, filled with the rise and fall of empires and the endless churn of the tides. But here, in this pocket of stillness, there is a perfect peace. You think of the generations of scholars who will come after you, and those who came before, all of us linked by the same thin thread of curiosity, the same desire to reach out through the dark and touch the thoughts of another. As you finally rise to leave, the sound of your footsteps is swallowed by the vastness of the hall. You walk out into the cool night air, leaving the great library behind you, yet carrying its entire weight within your heart. The stars above are bright and cold, the same stars that the ancient astronomers mapped with such painstaking care, and you feel a strange sense of kinship with the universe. You are a small part of a very long story, a single note in a symphony that never truly ends. The street is empty, the cobbles smooth under your sandals, and the scent of the sea is stronger now, promising a rest that is deep and restorative. You walk toward your home, toward the soft blankets and the familiar shadows of your own room, knowing that the scrolls are resting too, cradled in the dark of their shelves. The darkness of the ancient night is not a void, but a presence, a thick, comforting blanket that mutes the world and invites the soul to wander. As you lay your head down, the image of the library begins to fade, replaced by the rhythmic sound of the waves and the distant, muffled call of a nightbird. The lighthouse beam sweeps across your window, a gentle reminder that the light is always there, even when your eyes are closed. You drift further into the silence, feeling the heavy, peaceful pull of sleep. The words you have guarded all day now become the fabric of your dreams, weaving themselves into stories that have no beginning and no end. You are safe, the knowledge is safe, the night is long, and the peace of Alexandria is absolute. You let go of the day, letting your breath slow until it matches the slow, steady pulse of the sea, fading into the eternal, quiet dark of a world that remembers everything,